All right, good evening. You can grab a seat. We are going to get started. Welcome to the second Memorial Groves Public Information Session. My name is Chris Ballard. I am our interim president and CEO at Memorial Park Conservancy. And on behalf of myself and all of our staff and team at the park, we want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving up your Thursday evening. We're really, really appreciative of that. We're really excited to be able to show you all the work that the team has done in this next iteration of design. I am going to run through a few housekeeping items, notes, and acknowledgments, and then we will turn it over to the main presenters. First, I just want to take a moment and thank St. Teresa's Church, the staff, and the community here for hosting us this evening. It is great to be able to be here in the park. So if we could just maybe a quick round of applause for them. Thank you. Second, any public elected officials or their representatives want to take a moment, if you could just briefly stand as well and let us acknowledge and thank you. If we have any here, I know some may be running a little late. Okay. And then finally, want to thank and acknowledge our 10-year plan project partners. This would not be possible without this unique collaborative partnership. The City of Houston, Houston Parks and Recreation, Uptown Houston, and the Kinder Foundation. We are so grateful to their collaboration and their collective effort towards transforming Memorial Park. A little housekeeping on tonight. This is being recorded. We will post the link online on our webpage and through YouTube in the coming days. The first session is still posted online. We have been receiving questions through an email address. We've collected those questions this evening. You have white comment cards or little note cards in your seats. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to jot down a question. You can take them to the back or just kind of raise your hand and someone will come by and grab them. Any questions that, regardless of whether they get an answer here tonight, we will post responses online in the coming days. So there'll be a Q&A session at the end. Let me see here. I think that's, and then I'm going to introduce our speakers for tonight. You'll hear from four of us. Myself, Thomas Waltz, Senior Principal and owner of Nelson Bird Waltz, our landscape architecture and design firm since the beginning of the master plan. Emily Manderson, Principal and Senior Environmental Designer at Blackland Collaborative. If that name sounds familiar, Emily was the Conservation Director at the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center for a number of years. And then Michael Quino, who is Senior Archaeologist at Gray and Pape, a local cultural resource management firm. And Michael has served as team lead for all things Memorial Park since the master plan. All right, I think that's, so I am, okay, just to refresh everybody's memory, we had one of these back in September. Thank you to all who attended. Your feedback has been really important, and the design team has taken that really carefully and incorporated into the design. In this session, we focused on the early concept design and the emerging narratives through our ecological and historical research. If you get through tonight and you feel like you're missing a few of the chapters of the story, you are. And we would encourage you to go back and watch the first session, which is posted on our website. Really helpful to kind of lay the foundation of how we got to tonight and how the design has evolved. There's a lot going on this slide. The timelines and the projects themselves is not what I want to focus on. Just real briefly, let's go back 25 years to when Memorial Park Conservancy was founded, then Friends of Memorial Park. No staff. We get to 2011, 2012 in the drought. This is that moment that the collective, a group of people, the collective we said, we have to do something to protect and preserve Memorial Park. That launched the master plan. MBW was hired. We listened for a year before we put pen to paper. The result of that was a comprehensive master plan that contemplated projects across Memorial Park. unanimously approved by City Council in 2015. Very soon after that approval, through the catalyzing gift of the Kinder Foundation, launched this idea of the 10-year plan. Ooh, maybe here we go. Sorry about that. The 10-year plan was a suite of projects from the master plan, okay? And this collection of projects and the 10-year plan set general construction timelines for delivery, budgets based on the concept designs at the time. And as somebody who is newish to Houston and to the park and has spent the last 18 months getting up to speed on this partnership, I cannot reiterate and emphasize enough how carefully and thoughtfully and strategic this has been done to, again, protect and preserve Memorial Park. And that's our mission at the Conservancy, to preserve, restore, and enhance Memorial Park for all Houstonians today and tomorrow. The other thing I want to point out on this slide is the gray-white dotted line of "We are here." So the 10-year plan started in 2018, scheduled to deliver all of the major projects by 2028. So we're in 2025. We're making progress. And I think it's okay for us all to look ahead to 2028 and have that moment of collective both celebration and maybe a little sigh of relief. We know that these projects disrupt both the park and the park users. And so we too are looking forward to delivering on the 10-year plan. This is just another kind of map representation of the 10-year plan projects, the current, completed, and future projects. Of course, we're here to learn about Memorial Groves tonight. The projects in black are the projects that have been delivered that we all know and love. And then the two projects in orange, I will spend a little bit of time at the end of our time together talking about those. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our team and leave it on this slide. Oh, great. And we'll welcome Thomas.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much. We're just going to try the lights a minute. That's great. That's beautiful, Holly. So we can see each other a little bit, but you can really see the images. I wish I could. I bet they've tried before I got here. Can you give us all a massage afterwards? Well, I have a flight at 6:30 tomorrow morning, so I'll be busy through the night. A coupon. Okay, coupon for massage for everybody. I did want to just build on something sort of impromptu that Chris said about when we get to 2028 and this first big chunk of projects is complete, which, by the way, is something of a miracle, that this much public infrastructure has been created in such a short period of time. It's really incredible. And as a landscape architect working in many foreign countries and all over we've built parks in 30 of the 50 states, I've never seen anything like what happens in Houston, of the community coming together around public space. I'll just mention something else a little bit off the cuff. After we delivered the master plan, we started 12 years ago working on Memorial Park. This is NBW, Nelson Bird Woltz Landscape Architects. And at the end of that, we remarked that there's something unbelievable happening in Houston. When you think of the Buffalo Bayou, you think of all the different parks, Herman Park's restoration. There are so many parks that I asked the Cultural Landscape Foundation of the United States if they would host a symposium, and the museum loaned us the Brown Auditorium, and we had a full house, a packed house. We sold out immediately, and we called it Leading with Landscape, the Houston Transformation. And it was an all-day symposium of these incredible all-public projects funded through public-private partnerships to absolutely transform your city. And so to get to, in my career, to get to work with a city like that has been extraordinary. So I just wanted to start with a thank you to the city of Houston, its visionary leaders, its supporters, and its park users. You all know how to use public space, and that is wonderful, because that's why we do this work, is to try to make sure that as many people as possible in our country have access to meaningful nature for free. That's the big goal of our public parks work. We can get the most people in a healthy nature for free. Now, when you add to that a passion for restoration ecology and for history, you really start to do something meaningful for a community. People can go to a park and say, I know I'm in Houston and I know why Houston is here and I know why I'm here. And that's the intersection of cultural understanding and ecological restoration. And I think that's the most meaningful kind of public space. The project that's on deck right now stands squarely at the intersection of those two things. And so it's a very exciting one. The reason I'm stuck on this slide after Chris had mentioned like at 2028, maybe we can slow down because it's disruptive. What's actually pretty exciting is that if you follow my cursor, all of that will be done. That already is bigger than most major parks in urban areas around the world. That is a massive park. And you still have what I'll say are somewhat peripheral areas that are underutilized. The Houston Arboretum and Nature Center is very well utilized, but this block up here and this block down here, whenever that work happens, I think it can happen in a way that does not substantially disturb the user of the park. But this work can march on. You have 830 acres of forest and savanna in this park. Nobody else has that. That's enormous. It's really extraordinary. So the project that I'm presenting tonight, the Memorial Groves, is we've kind of embedded in that project pilot projects to figure out how to restore savanna and afforestation. So at the beginning, it wasn't really part of the idea, this idea to create a memorial, but we've gotten inside of the project now, funded test pilots, so we can learn how to do savanna restoration and afforestation around the whole 830 acres that you have. This is a massive ecological potential that has been neglected. So there's more work to do, but it is somewhat peripheral to the daily user. So I just thought I'd run through a few of the projects that have been accomplished. Finishing the Eastern Glades in COVID was an extraordinary experience. And my admiration for Tellefson and the Memorial Park Conservancy for getting that project done in such a difficult condition was absolutely extraordinary. And Shelley Arnold sent me photographs the day all the fences came down, and she said, you know, they've been up for so long during the massive construction. She said it was just like happy people just kind of wandering into this paradise and say, where did this lake come from? They had never seen anything like it. So I love this photograph because of just the splendid diversity of this city. And again, people knowing how to use public space. Love this image too of, we tried to be economical in our use of lawn. Lawn is a pretty unbiodiverse thing, but it sure is nice to picnic on and play on. So we need a balance of those kinds of outdoor recreational uses. So the central lawn of the Eastern Glades has become, in some ways, the front lawn of Houston. But you'll see in that project where any existing groups of trees that were healthy, we kind of carved around. So you sort of snake in and out of the existing trees. And then the large elliptical walk gives you a sense of order. You always know where you're going in this. This is the wetland that's to the west of the Eastern Glades. And what we did here was create a series of boardwalks. It's not great to walk through a wetland. It's not good for the ecology. It's not good for your shoes. And so we lifted you up on a very shallow boardwalk. It's within the legal limit to not have a guardrail. So you just float above the wetland and you don't have rails and things hemming you in, but with discrete signage that lets you understand the ecology of a wetland. But notice the layout of the boardwalk. That's a memorial to the fallen trees of the drought. The way those trees are crossed through the boardwalk reminds us of the devastation that we all saw 12 years ago, 2014, at the end of 4 years of no rain in Houston. That was actually why our firm was called. The park had gone through such a devastation of losing some estimates up to 80% of its canopy that this ecological reset button was an opportunity for the first time to give the park a master plan. So that's what we've been doing, is rebuilding in a post-drought world. But we wanted to remember that event in an elegant and quiet way. So the wetland walk, in my mind, is a memorial to the many, many trees, the thousands and thousands of trees that died in the drought. We're also passionate about ecological resilience. Flood will come again to Houston. Drought will come again to Houston. So what we did when we envisioned the master plan was to rely on the most ancient ecosystems that have shaped the Gulf Coast for thousands of years. And that is wet prairie, dry prairie, savanna, mixed pine, and hardwood forest. So we're really relying on those, not infinite acreage of mown lawn, which requires a lot of water and is not going to be healthy in drought. So this is just showing how the lake that we designed is calibrated to take on major storms, but also you can see the water draining down. And if you notice on this overlook where the food trucks park at this pavilion, you'll find gauges and steps that have the elevation above sea level. So you can measure the intensity of the storm. So you actually are engaged in the edge of the lake to learn how big was that storm. You can measure the water flow. So just creating these awarenesses of the ecology that surrounds us is embedded in every project in the park. This is the boardwalk that we created, hovering along the edge of the lake with pond cypress and bald cypress planted around it. They'll thrive in this very rich ecological edge of the wetland. We have several threatened species that have appeared, birds that have come to this new ecosystem. If you remember, this was a street. This was where the lake is, was the East Memorial Loop Road. So I'd call that an ecological improvement over the pavement and parking. I love coming here. It just makes me so happy. And more recently, you're seeing our baby prairie. Be patient with us. Prairies are maybe like human babies. Rarely are they cute at first. But about 3, they're just adorable. You can't keep your hands off of them. They're so cute. But this, I have to say, for first year prairies, this one is looking pretty amazing. And once again, it's thanks to the passion from the Memorial Park Conservancy and experts helping us gather native seed, grow native seed, build the soil, inoculate the soil with mycorrhizal fungi from the Katy Prairie. This is deep ecology to rebuild a native prairie like this. What you may not know is that the Scythia Melvin Wolf prairie, the excavation is sized to hold a storm the size of Hurricane Harvey. You probably thought it's just a prairie for the birds. And in fact, it's a very sophisticated, carefully calibrated engineering system that hosts a wet native prairie. So that wet native prairie can go underwater for the days that a storm could be held there. And what that's doing is it's preventing damage downstream. So the park is, and to me, this is a thread throughout all of our work in the park. The park is in service to its community. Even as a stormwater management project that don't look like no stormwater management project. I mean, this meadow, I think, is exquisite, but it can hold that much water. Just imagine what that does for downstream communities. You also get 2 spectacular mountains to see your city, a view that no one ever had, to really feel that connection to your beautiful city. You might know we also prevented the road from going into a landfill. We quarried, this is the eastbound lane of Memorial Drive, carefully quarried into large rectangles and then stacked to become the scramble over the land bridge. So reusing these items, we've had several people say, you know, I spent my whole life driving on that road and I feel kind of nostalgic when I touch that piece of asphalt. I thought, well, there's poetry everywhere. If you got poetry in a piece of asphalt, you got poetry. Um, this is another, I think, something Jeff and I probably share is trying to create things not only that connect people to nature in a park, but that connect them to each other. We have very few, because of our society, we're pretty isolated because of our air conditioning and our cars and the way we live in a spread out way. We rarely just bump into each other or get to know strangers. So can we create things in parks that invite a sense of community? So these little, these towers and this stripe runs all the way to the other side of the lawn on top of the west mound of the land bridge. Those are aligned with the rising sun and setting sun on the solstice and equinox. So what has happened is more and more people are finding out about this all the time. And there's just a ton of breakfast tacos at 4:30 in the morning and people enjoying themselves, meeting each other and getting to know each other because of Houston's connection to outer space. And I think that's a kind of phenomenal thing that the sun gathers us together in a public space and you might just meet a stranger and make friends. So the idea that none of these people know each other and they're all up there to see the sun rise through this little slot. It's just a tiny, tiny thing and it only occurs, twice a year, but it's a special moment. So the park is embedded with ideas like that. And then we wanted to embed the people out in the wet meadow. So this is an observation deck for bird watching and for engaging in that working ecosystem. Don't worry, the deck is set at a gradient higher than the full. If Harvey came again and the prairie was full, the deck is still higher than that elevation. This is Jaime Gonzalez. He was on the project from the very beginning, now leading tours of songbirds, incredible biodiversity inside of this wet prairie. So I'm thrilled at the results of this and a little bit giddy and certainly grateful. I love this photograph because you can see the cars going under and the park users on the top can actually forget that there's a 6-lane highway going underneath you. So you really, the use of design to create an experience that lifts you up over something that was very, very dangerous and really split the park in two. So now, where you had a divide, you now have a center. You have a middle. There's a there. The running track is another unusual twist, but because Memorial Park is our wilder park and our ecological park in Houston, unlike all other tracks, there isn't a giant mown lawn in the middle. There's a wetland and a forest and some ruins from Camp Logan, and you have a shady track to run on in the Houston heat. So it's a very unusual track. So many people said at the beginning, well, you have to cut down all the trees. And it's like, why? We can have this shady loop, and I think that's been a big success. If people will stop driving on it, can y'all help put a stop to? There's some people who've somehow gotten their cars onto it. We don't want that. I wanted to just mention Sham Architects did the Vibrant Cafe, bringing more programming into the park, elements that all came out of the public process that lasted for 2 years, the public input process over a decade ago. More restrooms, amenities, better maintenance. Another incredible thing that the Conservancy has done is grown their staff to take on the maintenance required for each of these new ecosystems. If you've noticed I happen to get really excited when I see stormwater management. Y'all may not, but when you park at the Eastern Glades, you'll see giant arcs of native plants and perennials. And those are swales that when it rains, collects roof water off the buildings, water off of all the pavement, and it goes into those open swales where it has time with plants and roots and soil before it drains into the bayou. So these kind of living systems are fantastic for pollinators, for wildlife, for biodiversity, and they're also cleaning and treating our stormwater. So they become a kind of event in the park. That is not something you hire a mow and blow crew to take care of, I can tell you. It is complicated, it is difficult. You have to be able to identify invasive species, be willing to do the manual labor to pull the invasive species out, and to make sure that that ecosystem thrives. The Conservancy has done something extraordinary, which is grow and educate their staff as new projects are brought on. So step by step, the Conservancy is growing and measure with the park to be able to care for and tend what I wish weren't unusual solutions, but unfortunately they are. This is using native plants to clean our water before we dump it in the river. It should be everywhere. That should be a very common detail. But unfortunately, we're down to sort of lawnmowers and leaf blowers. And the Park Conservancy has done much better than that. This is an aerial, and this is sort of a segue into talking about the memorial groves. You can see the yellow circle on the ground. That is around one of the archaeological remains of Camp Logan. So for anybody who missed the last meeting or missed sort of just the general history of Memorial Park, it was, well, at the very beginning, it was prairie land managed by the Karankawa people. So bison were here, that's why it's the Buffalo Bayou, and the Karankawa and many other language, sub-language groups thrived along the Gulf Coast. This tract, the first record of this tract under European ownership was the Reinerman family. The Reinermans owned not only all of Memorial Park, but about 3 times more land running north. It was a massive tract of land. It was a timber operation, cattle grazing, fruit orchards. It was sort of had an industrial edge to it, and it had a clay pit and a kiln for bricks. The land was therefore open and cleared, and so the US government rented it in World War I to make a training camp for soldiers called Camp Logan. At the end of the war, and Michael's going to talk to us extensively, specifically about the area of the Memorial Groves, at the end of the war, the Hogg family stepped forward and said, this roughly 1,500 acres should become a memorial to the soldiers that trained at Camp Logan. And they made a deal with the city, and the city bought it from them over time to create Memorial Park. One of the interesting things is that the idea was to make a memorial, and a century later, no memorial has ever been made. And if you think about what kind of memorial would have been made in 1925 versus 2025, I don't know, it might have been a white male soldier as a statue, and that might have been it. And I think in 2025, we're interested in who built the camp. Why was this the location of the camp? What kind of voices and people were actually here? Who fed the soldiers? Who grew the food that the soldiers ate? How did the soldiers move into the park, move out into the camp, out of the camp? There's so many layers to this story beyond a sort of statue on a pedestal. So I think we want to do something, no, we want to do something much bigger and much more impactful on people. So I start that with this little yellow circle because that is actually a grease trap from a mess hall in Camp Logan. And it's right there. You can see it on this map. That's the photograph of the actual mess hall. And then you can see in the center photograph the layout of the mess halls. And that's it. I mean, these are modest archaeological artifacts. But guess what? That's the real thing still in our midst. And when you can find the real thing, you have the opportunity for something that we're all starved for, and that is authenticity. Authenticity of place is what we have in Memorial Park when it comes to World War I. This is an overlay of the scale of Camp Logan. Most of the part to the west were drill fields, cavalry fields, places for practicing digging trenches and ditches, all the things that they would have to do when they went to war overseas. The yellow dot is that grease trap. So this is a photograph of Memorial Park, believe it or not. That is the scale of Camp Logan. What's interesting is it was made mostly of canvas. So it's an ephemeral city. Over 70,000 men, almost all men, trained at this camp and went to war. 70,000 people came through this landscape. That's big. And it's one of the only ones, there were 38 of these camps in the United States, and only 2 have not been developed. This is the only one that's completely intact. Another unique factor. So how is this now known? Well, it's a little, I'm all for love historical markers, wish there were more of them, but right there at Arnott is the only place that you get the World War I history. We have work to do to tell this story, to make a moving and significant memorial to this sacrifice. So when we started the master plan, there was a long sliver of land that kind of nobody had any ideas or needs or use for it. And it was this long strip between the railroad, the power lines, and West Memorial Loop. And it was so skinny, it couldn't really be ball fields. We have enough golf course on the other side of the street. That didn't need to grow here. And it was just a sort of fringe of land. And we have the big, big restoration work to the south of Memorial Drive all the way to the bayou. But this little strip of land, we weren't really sure what would be the highest and best use of it. Well, thanks to the archaeologists, we learned that it has the highest concentration of archaeological remains of Camp Logan than anywhere else in the park. They're all along this edge. Most of them are along this edge. Some are spotted throughout. But because this was kind of a back of house, sort of abandoned edge of the park, it has all of these things intact. So that led us another step toward authenticity. So this is how, so to the right is all golf course. The reason the line squiggles is that's West Memorial Loop. And the reason the line is straight on the other side is that's the Eureka rail line. So that's the rail line, and then you have the power line, the vast power lines, and then you have where all the tents were, where the soldiers lived. So this is the 100-acre site that was designated in the master plan for the memorial. That's West Memorial Loop Drive with parking along it. You're seeing the big lawns along this area. This is all cleared for golf course, and that's the rail line. And along here is the power line easement with center point. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael Aquino, who's going to walk us through some of the important and specific history of the camp. Thanks, Michael.
So anytime I have an archaeological project, hopefully there are 3 things that I'm going to tackle big picture wise: significance, archaeology, and uncovering, recovering stories. So that's kind of the bullet points I'm going to give you tonight to cover the archaeology at Memorial Groves and Memorial Park. First, significance. As we were just discussing, it's incredibly rare that the archaeological remains of Camp Logan are here at all. There's a quote here going all the way back to 1936. And so what happened in the 1930s, the WPA and other organizations really started developing Memorial Park into what we see today. And in the Houston Chronicle, it was this paragraph that I came across where they talk about even then, there was sort of an acknowledgement that most of these camps had already been completely redeveloped. And so when I did my research, I started looking at the 32 training camps, figuring out where they are on the modern landscape. And the breakdown is, 17 are still active military government installations that you can't access easily. 13 are commercial or residential development, and pretty much everything is gone. 1 pretty much exists completely on private property, and then Memorial Park. And what I've given you here is actually, this is Camp Bowie that was up in Fort Worth, Camp MacArthur that was in Waco, and that is the footprint of those camps. And you can see they're gone. Last time I was up in Waco, actually the historical marker for that particular camp sits in an HEB parking lot. So it gives you an idea of what has happened to these camps. So in terms of significance, you were looking at a very rare archaeological find, and you're looking at a site that was incredibly important both to the history of the United States, and also to the development of Houston. Now I'm going to talk about the actual archaeology. And you can see here a big, long bullet point list of this is all the archaeology that my team has done in Memorial Park as a whole, going all the way back to 2016. And I should introduce what kind of archaeology I do, because as many of you may have noticed, I'm not a dashing Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones type. I'm also not Laura Croft or anyone else that you've seen do archaeology on TV. I do what we call, very unattractively, compliance archaeology. I do archaeology that's usually mandated by the law. And so all of my archaeology is done in coordination with my client, in this case, the Conservancy in the city, and with the state, in this case, the Texas Historical Commission. So all of our projects, all of the work that we do, it's going back and forth between all of these groups to make sure that everything that we should be doing, we are doing. And frankly, when I look at this list of all the work that we've done going back to 2016, it's insanely impressive. This is not something that we typically get to do. A lot of times I'm working for a pipeline company or a company building a housing development. They want me in, they want me out, they want my report, and then they never want to hear from me again. It's very rare. They definitely do not ask me to speak in public. So talking about memorial groves, we've done 2 surveys that were specifically overlaid on the memorial groves footprint. And then we have a handful of other surveys that sort of touch on different areas of memorial groves. And we've identified 38 archaeological features: showers, lavatories, manholes, and grease traps. I know, you're like, oh my God, I want to hear more. Daily life and infrastructure at Camp Logan. So when I talk about an archaeological feature, this is usually what I'm talking about. And you're excited, right? Concrete footings, usually partially or totally overgrown by vegetation. Let me tell you something. In my line of work, we have a joke. Everybody poops, and that is good for archaeology. And the reason is because after shelter and food, one of the things that we do as people that leaves the biggest mark on the environment is getting rid of waste. And Camp Logan is a wonderful example of that. So this is what that foundation you saw looked like historically. A couple years ago, I went to the National Archives in Maryland, dug through a bunch of file boxes, and found a lot of these historic photos that showed what these buildings originally looked like. There's a really fascinating story behind these structures. When they built Camp Logan originally, they gave pit latrines. Now, Houston has many wonderful qualities. What we do not have is good drainage. So these pit latrines immediately started to fill up, and they had to do a whole lot of really unpleasant things in order to continue to make them work. And the Army eventually realized these men deserve better. We're training them to go fight overseas, and they deserve better in pit latrines. And so they came out and they built full plumbed sewer systems. Keep in mind, early 20th century, a lot of the guys who were coming to train here, who were from rural areas, and we had a lot of soldiers who came here from places like rural Wisconsin, the Dakotas, they probably had never seen indoor plumbing before. This was their first experience to the modern world, and we have it preserved in memorial groves and these showers and lavatories and the grease trap that we kind of glanced at earlier. But it's not just these big things that we're looking at. We also get tidbits of daily life. So as part of the work we do metal detecting surveys, where we work along grids and we dig up every metal find that we find. It's usually nails and pop tops and things like that. But we also find these really fascinating little tidbits to give you an insight to what the life of a soldier was like. We found this little thing, it's a centimeter in diameter. Took us a while to figure out what it is. It is the cap for an early tube of toothpaste. Toothpaste had only been going into tubes for about 20 years at this stage. Before that, you just had it in a jar and you rubbed it on your teeth. And tooth care was a big part of the modern Army. So when these soldiers came, one of the things they got, along with all the normal jabs and pokes and, inspections that you get whenever you join the military, they got their teeth looked at. There were dentists on staff, and these guys got legitimate tooth care. And when we go and look at the Houston Chronicle for the period, we see these advertisements where you can buy yourself a mess kit that is Army approved, and in that mess kit, the tube of toothpaste with its cap, and we recovered the cap right back by one of those lavatories. We start getting, again, building that picture of what the daily life is, not just, as soldiers, but just living in the camp. And finally, we can sometimes dig into individual lives. Again, doing one of our metal detecting surveys, we found a dog tag, an identity disc. World War I was the first widespread use of dog tags for the US Army. They issued them periodically in earlier wars, but this was the first time that they used them on a large scale. This one was for a soldier, Bernard Walmer, Private First Class, Company M, 129th Infantry. He was camped basically smack dab in the middle of Memorial Groves. And when we located the location of the dog tag, we could tell that he lost it, probably going in and out of the mess hall. Mess halls had dirt floors, so it was probably really easy to lose something. And we started digging into his life. And we know that he survived 2 different gas attacks, including one that's diagrammed here from an Army report that was probably the most severe gas attack that US troops suffered during World War I. When he came out of the Army, he came back to the United States. He'd been promoted from private to corporal. We found that in his Army records. He went back to Wisconsin, married the lovely Dottie. This is actually their engagement photo. And he spent the rest of his life living in Wisconsin. He started out working in car dealerships, and then he eventually got promoted and was running the service arm of a series of car dealerships in Wisconsin. Raced sporting dogs, liked boats. It's amazing what you can find about people when you start, digging into newspaper archives. So again, this is just one example of the sort of historical personal lives that we've been able to dig into. Some of it directly connected to the archaeology, some of it's purely archival. But if there's one thing I want you to come away with in terms of the archaeology as it relates to Memorial Groves and Memorial Park, it's that we've done a lot. And frankly, I'm blown away that the Conservancy has let me do as much as I've been able to do. Almost every time that I've gone to them, it's like, well, we could do this. If you want to give me, 8 more hours, I can dig up this information and we can figure out what's going on here. And almost every time their answer has been yes. They've really taken the archaeology seriously. And as a result, what we've built in terms of understanding the archaeology of Memorial Park is massive. That is the archaeology spiel.
Thank you, Michael. It has been such a pleasure to have your expertise on this project, because if our goal is authenticity, you're bringing it and letting us know where is it in this project we can hold hands with history. And that's a big part of the goal. Thank you. You're seeing the Memorial Groves now. I wanted to place it, the design of where we are, over the Camp Logan, so you can see this just completely vast and barren landscape. It's just incredible, the transformation since World War I. And you're seeing, the roughest diagram of the design. You see West Memorial Loop, and then you see this very large brown patch called Savannah, and then above that, the Memorial Groves. So I'm going to walk you through this is an overlay of where the tents were. So this is taking that 100 acres and showing you the exact plan from the Department of War of the layout of the camp. So what you're seeing are these streets. There's 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th streets. And remember, this is just a fragment of the camp. What? Sorry, I had to take my jacket.
Can I just ask, that way is west, right?
No, that way is north. It's like a reverse North Carolina, and Asheville's in the north. Sorry, that's north. And that's Wilmington, Delaware. I mean Wilmington, North Carolina. Sorry.
All right, so that's going north.
Yes, that's going north. That's I-10. I-10 is right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, we flipped it. Earlier it was going up and down, but to fit on the screen, we went sideways. And we're going to stay sideways. Yeah, we stay sideways for the rest of the presentation. So all of this are the tents. The little orange squares are all the tents, 16 feet on center, this rigorous, and each of these was a regiment. And what's extraordinary is because the golf course eats into the camp here, this is the only full regiment that we actually have in the Memorial Grove. So that's kind of neat because you can give people an idea of how big was a regiment. And we're just going to mark the corners. I love a puzzle that you come upon it. You're like, why is that pole here? And it says corner of the, I don't know, 382nd Regiment. So yeah.
How many soldiers make up a regiment?
Oh. I know we know. I know we have it. My God, we have it. It was 8 per 10. Do you know?
I was Air Force.
It should be around 12.
It's okay. Michael suggests around 1,200 for a regiment. Thank you, historians. I'm so grateful. Okay.
World War I.
All right. I'm gonna. So in the top, you're seeing the latrine buildings. Sorry. You're seeing the latrine buildings here. Officers' quarters down here. Cavalry stables up across the top here. So it was obviously a very rigorous architectural layout of these tents. These are some images from Camp Logan. You see some of the few trees within this region that they had left. Thank goodness. The poor soldiers must have really suffered in the Houston heat, and they probably had wool uniforms, is a guess. These two photographs really struck our team's imagination as a bit of a breakthrough. One of the things that's difficult to evoke about World War I is the scale. The scale of loss of life, the destruction of entire cities and regions and ecologies and forests in France, all over Europe. It was a devastating war, and it was a war of trench warfare, which is a brutal kind of war. Think also about the incredible diversity of the individuals coming to Camp Logan. They wore different clothes, they came from different places, they were a range of races and origins, ethnic origins, of religions. They were individuals, like this room, every single one of us, a unique individual. And part of coming to military training was the transformation into a soldier that would operate as an organism, as one living thing in the act of war. It's a horror, but it's a fascinating thing to think about this landscape being where individualism dropped away and you came to operate as an army, as a unit, as one thing. You wore exactly the same clothes, you ate the same food, you slept in the tents together. Everything was rigorous and regimented in this transformation. I mean, it's kind of a sad thought, but it's a powerful thought that that's what it took. That's what happened here, was that transition from an individual to a group. This forest in snow in Japan really struck us as not dissimilar from the photos of the soldiers marching and training in World War I. And we thought, what if trees planted on the 16-foot increment of the tents could grow to represent the thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers who trained here? What if you stood in that grove of trees? And I think much more moving to be in a living memorial than standing in front of a granite statue. So what if we bring you to this place of authenticity that Michael has uncovered for us, where we have the most ruins, the most ability to remember the life of these people, the actual life of these people on the place that it happened. But we do that with trees rather than pavement or statues. So it's an abstract memorial. It's a very big memorial because we're using this large landscape, But I think because of the war and the degree of sacrifice of the individuals, it merits this scale. This quote I wanted to read from Ilona Benda. She wrote, "Whatever may now come or now be made of our Camp Logan, we never can escape the fact that once upon a time, a gripping, searching, cruel, glorious time when self lay conquered beneath our feet, the very heart of our nation beat within this sphere. In moonlight nights, in silence so soft that our hearts can hear their throb, you will still hear its steady beat. For spiritually, this is sacred ground." What a great basis for a memorial. So, looking back at historic photographs, this area at this edge, as I mentioned before, this long, skinny strip of land in 1952, you can see what it looked like. Very sparsely populated with individual trees. Some of those trees are still here. And this was what we came on our first visit to Memorial Park in 2014. This is after the drought. So you can see how many trees were destroyed at that time. So, yes.
Do you have a photograph from 2024?
Yes,
Okay.
coming. So I just wanted to walk you through the concept plan. This being our whole outline area, I'm going to start at the top. That is the rail line across the top. And then number 4 is the power line easement. We're going to hear about the ecological studies and surveys that we've done. Because of the power line easement maintenance, that has actually become a thriving and healthy coastal prairie. So we want to protect that prairie, this very long strip, and it's just where the stables were from the camp. Then, because of the regrowth, so we're dealing with different soil types actually in this part of the park, and Emily's going to walk us through that. This portion has rebounded much better than this portion. So as we looked at it, we thought we have some healthy trees, some healthy ground covers, but it's choked by invasive plants. We need to transform this into savanna, this native Texas ecosystem. So what we did was protect all of this portion of savanna. We did an individual tree survey, marked every healthy tree on a survey so that we can keep all of the healthy trees. And in this portion, so we get that sense of the soldiers, we're planting in between the healthy trees. At the end of the day, it's 9 acres of interplanting between the existing trees and 9 acres of planting in lawn. So that's the new planting is 18 acres. The savanna is a little over 20 acres of preservation. The one thing that we're imagining is this line is a straight walk, and it's really about scale. How long is it, Jeff? It's a half a mile long. And so when you look down that colonnade, you see, I don't know if you see to the past or to the future, but you see forever down this one line. And one of the ideas was that the savanna represents the diversity of the nation, of these individuals coming. It's a very mixed ecosystem, but they transformed into these soldiers. And this line, you can see trees to either side planted. Those are the survivors, the ones who came home. And so they walk through the open, sunny savanna with you. This area is a new interpretive center, parking here and parking here. There's 1.5 acres of parking for the entire western, this portion of the park, the Memorial Groves. And a target parking lot's 4 acres, just to give you a sense. So we're at 1.5.
Is that a struggle, the parking? Because I know when I ride my bike, say on Saturday morning, around the park, over where the running trail is, they are struggling to find a parking place. And then all along where everybody's running by the tennis center, struggling to find a parking place.
Yep, parking is always an issue. And one of the things that we're doing is keeping the 200 and some parking places that are along West Memorial Drive and adding parking here and here. So that's additional parking. We're trying to moderate that because you don't want to pave the park with parking. And hats off to you for coming to the park on a bike. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of places I can't go on my bike. So you can't go near the lake and you can't go over the bridge. So I'm limited, unless I'm walking.
We'll get you 30 miles of trails in the southern half of the park. How about that?
So how many spaces does that equate to 1.5?
These are great questions. If we can
We're
just,
not quite to
yeah,
Q&A.
we
If
got Q&A at the end. If you can write your questions down on the card.
Thank
we'll
you.
Get through the presentation.
Thank you, Chris.
Appreciate it. Yeah, you bet.
So this is the Visitors and Interpretive Center and offices for Memorial Park Conservancy. And you begin this long walk here. And this, I'm going to show you a little later, is an earthwork that's kind of the core of the memorial experience. This is a breakdown of the space in this area. So 60% of the 100 acres is prairie, savanna, and forest. 20% is new planted trees for the memorial. So that is interplanting. So this is the survey that shows you every big healthy tree. So the blue, dark blue, is where we're interplanting, and the light blue is open lawn, where we're planting trees where there aren't any. So that's how we get that sense of scale, is by planting in the lawn and in between some of the trees, particularly on this northern part where there are fewer of the big trees, and then preserving all of this as savanna as part of the memorial. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily to walk us through the ecologies.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm going to zoom out just a bit from the park and look at the United States, even larger than the US. But as you can see, I don't know if I can do this. Is that the
Down button.
Oh, the down button? This is the Great Plains.
Wait, the point down.
Yes, I was just doing the laser. Thanks. So the yellow portion is the Great Plains grassland system. So that is what we're part of, which extends all the way from the Gulf up into Canada. So it's a massive ecosystem of the United States. And unfortunately, now approximately about less than 1% of it remains today. And a lot of that's happened because of first agriculture and now development and also woody encroachment. So now zooming into Texas, and here is Harris County, still part of the Great Plains, but we get into smaller communities here from looking at it at such big scales. So Houston is primarily Gulf Coast, and the piney woods to the east, and then some post oak savanna. And then zooming into Houston, or in the greater Houston region. And so this is Houston Wilderness put together this map here. And you can see the site, which is near the Galleria, all in the inner loop there, is primarily prairie and bayou ecosystem with the piney woods and the post oak savanna at the exterior. So here's some of what you would see. So Houston was historically primarily a grassland system with different densities of trees. So we have the prairie, we have the savanna, and a lot of the trees really were along the bayou systems and other tributary systems. This is where you'd have more of the eastern piney woods. So zooming back out again, half of the grassland plains really has enough water to be more of a forest and a woodland, but there's a reason why it's not, and that is because of the disturbances that used to happen historically. And in a prairie, over time, if there is no disturbance, woodies are going to come in and encroach. But we have these disturbances that keep things open. This is of an elephant from the savanna in Africa. We didn't have that here. We had the bison. And this is a picture from Nebraska, not necessarily the system here, but the Great Plains ecosystem. So we had these disturbances, and the disturbances actually kept the ecosystems healthy. Those disturbances, smaller scale, patchy ones like a fire or the bison, kept that biodiversity up and really is needed so that when there is a larger disturbance like the drought in 2011, the site can be more resilient, or the landscape. This is showing you a map of pre-European settlement, the frequency of fires, and you can see how associated that is with that grassland plain and how those have co-evolved together. And that in Houston, it used to happen historically every 1 to 5 years. And we know that also Native Americans were historically in the Great Plains using fire as a management tool. They used it for multiple reasons, to communicate, for their own hunting and gathering, and they knew they were managing the land to make it more healthy as well. And that is continuing now. And this is the Nature Conservancy is partnering with people in Alabama, and they need the longleaf pines to be able to make a lot of their baskets and other weavings. So it's up to us now to be mimicking those small scale disturbances, especially in urban environments. So all of this is a diagram of a state transition map, which I'll go through the ones for the site. It's a little bit geeky here, sorry. But it really, what I'm trying to show is that management plays such an important part, and we've lost that. And that doing nothing to an environment really is a management decision. And especially in the urban environment, it's most often for the detriment of the ecosystem. It means more invasive species, loss of biodiversity, and that we really have a relationship with the landscape, and we need to be actively managing it. So this is what the historic conditions were based on the soil survey and also the analysis that happened initially as part of the master planning effort. And so what we have here is we had a lowland and poorly drained loamy upland, and then we have blackland prairie soils. All of this essentially were soils that sustained grassland ecosystems. And so going to the state transition map from the soil survey, this is what the reference condition would have looked like. It was a grassland system, probably more to the right in that horizontal diagram of the site plan was more prairie with less trees, and then to the left was more savanna, but still a grassland system, but with more trees. This is an image of Marguerite Kincaid wrote a thesis. She was a botanist, and of the ecology of Memorial Park. And this is a picture of what she had, one of her images of an open grassland system that was here on Memorial Park. So this is what we found the condition to be at its current state. And so we saw here, this is a woodland here, and then we looked at the prairie and converted grassland. So I'll go through these just a bit. So the woodland, which we really ended up seeing it more as one management unit. There wasn't, oftentimes with different soil types, they'll have a real distinct difference. Here, there was not a huge difference in terms of tree species. There just was more hardwoods to the left and more pines to the right. But primarily, it has become encroached. So it's moved from its reference condition to an encroached condition. And so really since the drought, so many small woodies have come in and invasive species as well. And it's not in a really optimal condition, and there are challenges with that. So we saw low diversity, first of all, and low diversity in the sense of the types of trees that were there, the ages of trees that we saw, the structural diversity. You also want to have that as well. And then there was also a high amount of invasive cover and too dense. It's very vulnerable, and it is right now because of the thick woody encroachment. It's a fire hazard. So then this zone here is, it has now even stepped down even more. It's a pasture and crop. It's pretty much 100% invasive cover and very low resiliency. And then the prairie area, which is on site, really the only reference condition. And because of the disturbance of Center Point, it has remained a prairie. And it's got some amazing diversity in there, but it's also not necessarily pristine. It does have invasives and other things of that nature in there. But it is something that we definitely want to protect and learn from. So this is our condition map, green being the highest of value, and then red being the lowest in terms of ecological value. And so this is what our recommendation for the site would be irregardless of the design, is that what we would do to improve ecosystem function. And what our thought is we're looking at the historical conditions, the current conditions of where they are, and then also taking into account the future. So we're not necessarily, when we're talking about restoration, trying to go back to a certain time. We're looking at ecosystem function. How can we make this as functional as possible and as resilient as possible? So for the prairie, obviously, we want to protect that as much as possible. For the woodland area, we recommend that it needs to be thin and do some spot treatment of the invasives. And then of the Bahia grass, we would recommend replacing that. So when we jumped in with the team, which has been wonderful, and by the way, Nelson Birdwaltz is like, they were with us in the field sweating, and I don't know how they did it. They looked so professional the whole entire time. It looked like I ran a marathon. So that was the first landscape architect group that have really stayed with us the whole day in the field, which is amazing. When we first were looking at this site, initially, if y'all been following the plan, it had the groves and then kind of motts of trees dispersed through it. And so as Thomas said, there was a decision to make it more of a unified unit. And a lot of that came out of discussions with Memorial Park about management, and that it'd be easier for them to have it more clearly defined what they needed to do and how to manage it, which makes a lot of sense. And so we also really like that because it reduced the fragmentation of that natural area, and it just enhances the ecosystem services of that. And then also pulling from the prairie, I'm really excited for those species to get to come down into the savanna. And so when I'm talking about savanna, it's really primarily a grassland system, pretty much the same species that you'd find in the prairie, but then you have a little bit more trees coming in there. And so we're looking at somewhere in between these two densities of trees for that area is what we're anticipating that will result. Grassland systems are amazing for Houston because they are dependent upon those disturbances and thrive. They can handle drought, they can handle fire, they can handle freezing. What else?
Flood.
Flooding, yes. Great with flooding, amazing green infrastructure. So half of their biomass is underneath the ground. They just go to sleep on the top and then they bounce back up. So one of our recommendations is that there needs to be some invasive management happening. There needs to be some woodland thinning for fire reduction, also getting some light in for the savanna. We need more light so that it can sustain a grassland. And continued with this invasive management here. What we recommend is doing a first thinning of the smaller invasive and the woody species so that we can go in and first and just really see what is happening there. Because right now we really can't. And there's so much information that we need to look at. So going back to these are NBW's photographs here. This is 2014. As you can see, it really was much more open. A lot of the green that we are seeing now is post 2014. So those are early successional pioneer trees, species that have come in there. And again, it's not in a pristine state. So up here you can see this is sort of an encroached woodland, doing some clearing and then getting that grassland system established. So there's precedent for this. There's precedent for it at the park itself. Many great things have happened and they've had great wildlife response. The one that I know and is near and dear to my heart is the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center. And we too were affected by the drought and went through a master plan process to respond and make it more resilient in the future of climatic disasters and events. And we've had great success there. And one of the main things, we had Harvey as we were in the middle of it, and that was a great test that we were moving things in the right direction and it held water so much better than it had previously. But the wildlife response, all of this information that we talk about, and I'm up here presenting about, but when you see the wildlife respond and how quickly they respond, it is such good feedback and information. We have had 9 new species that were never recorded on site in the savanna now. The red-headed woodpecker is one of those. We also were able to get out there pre-construction and put out some plots and start monitoring. We got baseline information, and then we've been monitoring still continually. They are monitoring, and we have quantitative data that shows the increase of pollinators that's happening there, and that's really exciting as well. So all of this has not been done alone, and so we're really hoping, we're excited to build upon all the work that Memorial Park has been doing and learn more from this Savannah project as well, and then really bring that information more into the natural land management of the park itself.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm going to wrap up now with just the very core, the heart of the design. I wanted to just mention, we have this exciting opportunity to have 20 acres of savanna and 20 acres of new trees as a test case for the memorial that has been funded to apply across everything you see. So we have it's a tremendous opportunity to use this to learn about how best to manage a lot of the neglected land. I want to just talk about the experience of coming to the Memorial Groves. From the left, I had mentioned that we have a parking, we have a new playground, parking lot, picnic shelter, restrooms, so that as you come from this is kind of the play, family, fun area. You have the restoration of the big savanna in the center. And then I would say more the contemplative side, really talking about, yes?
I love, everything's beautiful, I love it. I just was wondering why there's no thought of having bike trails and.
I'm getting there. The outer loop trail goes through this. So for the recreation, one of the things we wanted to talk about is all the different kinds of people that participated in this. So one of the ideas was to play off the hats of the many cooks, nurses, construction workers, and soldiers. And so working with a playground design company, looking at how we could make fun things that are using these actual elements. So even the children's play is touching on this theme of the camp. For your question, the outer loop trail we're proposing runs along this spine that was a historic road through the camp. So that orange line is connecting over the living bridge to the outer loop trail all the way through to continue that way, because Seymour Lieberman is right here along Memorial Park Drive in that zone. Yeah, just like the outer loop trail and the rest of the park. And then this is an idea about a boot camp fitness where you could run and have workout stations that you exercise. And again, we're trying to get people, what is a day in the life of a soldier? So you have the boot camp trail and then these large open lawns that are in exactly the location of the historic street. So those are big play and picnic lawns that help order and structure. So the design of it is actually the design of the camp, but transformed into 21st century park uses of play, lawn, recreation, athletics, workout, running, biking, hiking. But it happens to be a memorial. So this is what it could look like. This is that outer loop trail that I was just mentioning. This is one of the cross streets that would be a long, long lawn that would be in one of those areas. And you can see some of the, this would be a fall pick. Good Lord. Hang on, Thomas. These are some of the bald cypress that is the tree we're proposing to use to represent the soldiers that you're seeing in the distance. So you're seeing the open savanna with large mature trees, play lawn, and athletics. We thought for the signage of the boot camp to have actual World War I soldiers doing all their exercises to kind of, bring it home and make it a lot of fun for families. Can you imagine working out in all that clothing? It's boots and wrapped calves. It's crazy. And then this would be in fall because, bald cypress turned this rust color And there's a point to that. So you're seeing in the distance the savanna that's more hardwood, and then the bald cypress planted just exactly where the tents were. They're at the same spacing as the tents, representing these soldiers standing at attention. Um, and I think one of the most moving parts is that in early November, when it gets cold, the bald cypress go from dark green to this beautiful rust color. And that is when the armistice was signed. That's when World War I ended and when we have Veterans Day. So it's a very appropriate, almost natural response to the memory of World War I. This is an overlay from Michael's work of all the archaeological remains we have here. So this really is the authentic and the best place for the memorial to occur. It happens to be a long, skinny area, and that's why we're using these long walks to really evoke scale. One of the ideas is to create this day in the life of a company street where we would recreate some of the structure or frames of the tents so people could get an idea of the size, and then with signage and interpretation, really bring home the personal stories of the individuals. This was a song that one soldier who was actually in prison at the time wrote, Just One Letter From You. And one of our historians on the team found this, and our graphic designer in our office is quite a musician, so he transposed it, played it on the piano, and sang it. And we played it at our cultural advisory group meeting. This is the kind of signage, not overwhelming, made of core 10 that a lot of the signage in the park already is. So it's very discreet, but really informative about where you are in the world, really telling the story of the camp. So I'm wrapping up here with this diagram. As I mentioned earlier, World War I was a war mostly fought in trenches. And one of the things the soldiers learned to do at Camp Logan was to dig trenches and build trenches. And this is what, when deployed, they did in Europe. The standard dimensions of a trench were 12 feet deep with a bench for sitting, while running happened here, and you could clamber up and shoot from here or from here. We thought, this is a really powerful, iconic thing that World War I had that was very unique. It can't be very unique. It was unique. So one of the things we suggested is for this core of the memorial is to invert that and build at height out of earth the inverted trench 12 feet high and create a space inside where you could come in meditation and safety and sanctity. This also helps to block the noise from I-10 and from the railroad. So this is what that inverted trench, very similar in dimensions, but that you could walk through an opening into this space. Two sides would be 12 feet tall, two sides only 4 feet tall, so you don't feel so enclosed. And this is what that could look like. So this is walking from the visitor center to the right, through here, into this space, looking out into the trees, and then a 50-foot long table. And it's a table that has about a ½ inch of water running over the top of it. So it functions as a mirror to the sky. It's a kind of portal above and below. And it's the table to which many of the soldiers will never return. And so it's a place of calm, quiet, and meditation. This is what that table, water table would look like. You're looking out over the low berm into the groves and looking back through that slot to the visitor center. Moody Nolan has been engaged to design the visitor center, and this is their concept rendering how you arrive, and you move straight through to the outside, and this is the interpretive center, and this is the MPC offices. So I'll close with this mention: as the sun of day burns down and the gulf winds cools with his breeze, the nights, as the shadows fall and the moonlight ghosts over the landscape, Camp Logan lies in a waiting attitude as to what will next be done. But at night, the past, that past, which has just closed its chapter, hovers over it all. 1923, Ilona Benda. What's important to remember in this memorial is it's a living memorial to a thing that we all share, and that is death. For most of us, it will come very late. The average age of the soldier killed in World War I was 24 years old. These are kids. And I think having this place as a place to remember their sacrifice, as a place of living things that remind us of their sacrifice at scale. This was not the place they died. This is not where they're buried. This is where they came with energy and hope. They learned and they were transformed and then made their sacrifice for their country. So it's a place about the future. And I think planting baby trees now and watching them grow, these bald cypress can live 600 years. This is forever, as far as our timeline is concerned. So to take this idea of young soldiers and young trees and plant them, but this land will remember them and their sacrifice for generations to come. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
All right. Well, we know we're at time, so if you need to get up and leave, that is okay. We're going to take just a few minutes here to gather the questions and get set up for the Q&A. Just a couple of notes to close on what's next. So what you heard tonight is schematic design. We now move into a phase of design development, and by name and definition, it is still design. There are questions to be asked and questions to be answered still. And in a project like this, part of design is a period of site preparation. So you will see us fence the project site in April. Traditional construction is not set to begin until January 2026. But what that 9-month period does, it allows us time to do exactly what Emily presented on. Treat and prepare the site in a thoughtful, methodical way. We treat, we walk, and we assess, and we treat. That timeline also gives us the different seasons. We know that different plant species function differently throughout the year. So we get a little bit of spring in April, summer, fall, and winter. January 26, construction is scheduled to begin. Right now, we're projecting an 18-month timeline, which puts completion summer of 2027. I mentioned the remaining major projects of the 10-year plan, those two listed in orange here. The Uptown Memorial Park Trail and the Southern Arc Trail. The Uptown Memorial Park Trail is a project, again, out of the 10-year plan. It is being led and designed by Uptown. The Southern Arc is a Memorial Park Conservancy project. Both of these are trail and connectivity projects. And I think safe to say a little more straightforward than Memorial Groves. And so these, where they are today is you may see some ribbons around some trees, some stakes. They are in the surveying phase and understanding the landscape and potential alignments. We would encourage you to check our website and Uptown's website for future information on those projects. Okay, so let's take just a couple of minutes. If you have your questions, maybe raise them up and we can gather them, and we will, no bathroom break, I'm sorry, and we'll start answering questions.
All right, thanks everybody for your patience. I know we are already at time, but we definitely wanted to take time. We're gonna focus on addressing the questions that were sent in advance first. The people that we got a lot of thoughtful questions that came in ahead of time. We're going through the ones that you've submitted tonight. So please forgive us. I know we won't be able to get to every question that is asked, but we will answer them online afterward. And this bank of wonderful speakers and presenters, they're gonna hang out a little while after we wrap. So please feel free to come up and talk more. All right. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Holly Clements. I'm the Vice President of Engagement for Memorial Park Conservancy. All right, so starting with first question that we received in advance, can you touch on the species of every tree and plant that will be excavated? I think who wants to take that one? I mean, Emily. Okay, that's a good one for Emily.
Maybe not every.
We do not know of which every single species. We know that a lot of, well, like I said, we want to do an initial thinning, and that's of the overgrown woody species. So some of those are invasive, some of those are native but really aggressive species like dewberry. There's some very big dewberry in there. And tallow, ligustrum species, but there are smaller pines and smaller other things that we would also like to thin those out so that we can see. But as I mentioned, some of that age diversity is important too. So we will want to keep some of the smaller native trees as well so that we have that age diversity eventually. But at this point in time, we don't know all the species.
All right, thanks, Emily. All right, were there other less invasive or less destructive plans considered? I mean, these are, I'm reading them verbatim from what we got, so.
Yeah, thank you. What we would love to reiterate, and you'll get sick of me saying this, is that this plan absolutely has moved from concept. We've listened and we've learned. Master plan concept, the concept you heard in September, and what you heard tonight are all different. And that's in response to the feedback we've received. Specifically, I would point out that parking lots have been moved to open areas in the project site, already less disturbed or more disturbed areas to impact fewer trees. We've reduced the number of paths within the project. We've shrunk the size of the groves to accommodate for a savanna restoration. And we've changed species of tree from pine to a bald cypress, which we believe to be a more resilient and appropriate species for this site.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Have you considered alternative designs that would save the mature trees and vegetation in this part of the park?
So I would answer it similarly. As Thomas mentioned, the mature trees will be preserved within the site, both within the savanna and when in the groves landscape. We've gone through that work of surveying those trees, but all of the trees, yes. So the healthy, mature, native trees will be preserved. Of course, the parking lots and some of the buildings, trees inevitably will come out there, and that's part of a project of this size and scale, but primarily in 80% of the landscape, the mature trees will be preserved.
Okay, we have a question that just says growth rate, question mark, which we take that to mean what's the growth rate of the trees?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's the bald cypress. They can grow up to 4 feet a year. They love this ecosystem. We just redid the Central Historic Quad at Rice, and we're counting on them growing to give shade inside the quad. They're remarkably adaptable to different soil types, to dry and wet. So you should see them grow very swiftly. We are, I think, for their establishment benefits and for budget, they're going in fairly small. So that 4 feet a year will very quickly see, it'll be Houston fast.
I like that. I like that.
Yes, they are native.
All right. Similar, just short question. Irrigation rate.
We're doing establishment irrigation. Again, this is using a native tree that likes this climate. So it's not like a annual bed at your house. It's something that needs tough love to establish properly. But in the event of a tremendous drought, the year of planting, we have establishment irrigation.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the patience. We're trying to get through these as quickly as we can, so we can get to as many as we can. All right, this was an advanced question that we did receive. Do you think this design honors the soldiers who died there? Many of us feel it is a desecration and an insult to their memories to use them as an excuse for further development of the park.
That came before this presentation.
Can we wait and see if it comes back again? No. Again, it's the third time now. This concept and this idea was approved in the master plan after thousands of Houstonians gave input during that process. And two, as Thomas mentioned, just for total for no misunderstanding, right? The soldiers did not fight a battle or are not buried here. But and to answer directly, yes, we do believe that this project can honor the memory of not just the soldiers, but all the different hats of the people that were worn, who built the camp, lived here, and trained. And let's take a moment and recognize what we've called our cultural advisory group. So this is a group of a variety of experts that we have been pulling together for the last at least couple of years on different moments in time. Historical, cultural, ecological experts from across the city. Texas Historic Commission, Buffalo Soldiers Museum, Emancipation Park, Fourth Ward, ecologist. And we have asked ourselves this exact question. We have sat in a room for hours and pushed and pulled on how do we do exactly that? How do we tell the stories in a thoughtful and appropriate way? And we believe that the collective sacrifice of those who built the camp, who served, who went overseas, we think this project can do it. We know it can do it. Yeah.
How many acres of trees and number of trees will be torn down? Who wants to take this one?
You want the chart? Again, they didn't see the chart, so they don't.
Yeah, the chart wasn't. I would refer you back to the pie graph, the chart. So 80% of this landscape will remain landscape and native ecology. So I would encourage you to look at that and study that. Thomas mentioned only 1.5 acres of new parking lots. So yeah, I would encourage you to study that. And 60%, so 60% of the savanna and the woodland, and then the other 20% of the groves. That's the 80%. So again, the mature trees within that 80% preserved. Yeah, I mean, it will be in the link, but it may be easier to click through, so we can. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Have you considered downsizing this project and relocating it to existing open spaces within the park?
I'm going to let Michael just remind us about the rarity of.
So I think I stressed just sort of how unique the archaeology component of it is, and how by incorporating the memorial here, you can get that lived in daily life experience. And furthermore, broadly speaking about archaeology and history in Houston, I do a lot of archaeology in Houston. There's history and archaeology in Houston, but there is nowhere in the city that you can go and see archaeology in its context. You can go to the museums, but to see it in a place, in context, and get that lived-in experience, that's going to be unique to here. And so I do feel that, it's the ideal location for that.
Thanks, Michael. All right, we have a question about wildlife. Emily, I think this one has your name on it. How will this impact wildlife? How many coyotes, rabbits, armadillos, etc. will be displaced?
Well, the good thing is that these critters have all evolved with the prairie, the ecosystem with those disturbances. So, and also there's a lot of other green space. So they'll just run over to other places and then they'll come back. The thing that we are excited about is that really the savanna restoration should improve the wildlife. We saw that quantitatively at the Arboretum and with bird counts and everything, that there will be more diversity happening here. and it happens very quickly, as I said before. So that's really one of the goals.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's exciting. Okay, we have one that came in just today to our email. Can you please is in caps, by the way, can you please create the grove without additional tree removal?
I'll say what you've said 3 times now. All the existing healthy trees have been surveyed, and we've adapted the plan around those trees. And the groves portion is being planted in open exotic grass that needs to be changed anyway. So we're filling an empty space with trees, and then we're interplanting between healthy mature trees. All of that is less than 20 acres. It's I think the language of these questions about sort of wreaking devastation is just missing what our whole heart in this project is.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. We have a lot of questions that have come in, so please, again, beg forgiveness not being able to address them all tonight. But as with our last September meeting, we will answer all of the questions. If not tonight, they will be available on our website for everybody to view. And again, these 4 have been gracious with their time. They're going to stay with us. So if you don't hear your question answered, please be invited to come and talk to one of them. I'm going to try to get through just a couple of these if we can, just a few extra minutes. These are questions that came in just from this audience. What diseases are bald cypress subject to?
I'm not an arborist, so I'll say that. We do have Dr. Todd Watson, who was on also the Arboretum team, who can speak to that, and he is the one who really advocated for the bald cypress over the loblolly pine because they are so much more disease resistant. They don't have the same issues as the pine bark beetle and things like that. So the bald cypress are really, they can handle drought. They have a lot, they're much more resilient of a species. So that is an exciting, besides their beauty and their change of color and all that great stuff, they are better species.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I think this might be a good one for Thomas. Are there any other examples from around the world that are similar war memorials incorporating the ecology and park elements?
Yeah, there are several. We did precedent research, and several of them were in Germany, where they were large forest landscapes that had been battlefields. There's one I remember in particular where they had done the opposite of what we're planting trees to remember the soldiers, and they had cut down trees. There's a massive circle in the center of a huge planted forest. I don't even know if it's a planted forest, but it's a massive forest in Germany with this giant circle, and the memorial is inside of that circle. I've never seen anything that's this kind of sort of representing, well, as Michael said, we have the literal place where the soldiers lived. And so taking that grid of 16 feet and representing it with trees is it's almost a direct translation of the soldiers' lives into the sky. So I think it stands as pretty unique, but there are other big landscapes, particularly in on the coast of France, where the landing, but those are World War II memorials. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Some of these, I think, echo some of the questions that we have already received and answered. So I'm going to do my best to ask some new questions. Is it possible to do some sound mitigation at the north end of Memorial Groves? The traffic noise is intense at the north end. I think from the I-10, from I-10.
So the core of the memorial that you saw, the 12-foot high earthwork, the giant rectangular space, that was actually inspired in part by wanting to mitigate sound from both the rail. So you noticed it's like 2 L's. The east and south side are 4 feet high, where you have East Memorial and the Savannah. And then the part to the west is the rail line, and the part to the north is I-10. So those are 12 feet high. Nothing mitigates sound like earth. I mean, it's pretty incredible because they're also at an angle, and sound is waves, and the waves hit that angle and deflect back. So we think we've created something that is a kind of sense of sanctuary and calm inside of this for that really contemplative site with the long 50-foot long water table inside. So yes, sound has been very much taken into account.
But I'm paging through some of these. I'm just alluding to, we do have some questions about specificity of acreage of the new plantings, some additional questions specifically about bald cypress, and just noting that I'm just acknowledging that there's been a request to allow people to ask questions as we go along, which I know we did end up doing a little bit of, but in the interest of trying to get through the presentation, thank you for your patience with being willing to fill out the comment card. So we appreciate you working with us on that. How are you recognizing, I think this will be the last question we have time for, how are you recognizing the segregation that plagued the camp with the excessive summer heat and burning sun? Sorry. How do you justify spacing trees out to duplicate the savanna? It's too damn hot.
I'll tackle part of that. Well, at 16 feet on center, Holly and I are two bald cypress that will grow to 70 feet tall. So the northern half of the memorial will be a continuous shade, and the ground plane will be the needles of the bald cypress. So a very soft and quiet. As you move into the savanna, you're going to have much more open sun and a highly diversified grassland. And I think the contrast of those two actually makes this a place that's a wonderful destination in winter, when the sun is out and it's cold, as you move through the savanna, and then in summer in the immersive shade of the grove. So it has a climate to enjoy at all seasons. We have put the playground at the south end amidst the grove, so there'll be lots of shade for the playground and the picnic pavilion. Each of the lawns, they're running east-west, so the southern side would be shaded for picnicking there as well. So there's a diversity of ecosystems within the shade of the park.
And I do want to make sure that we address the first part of this question, which has to do with the segregation that existed in the camp. And we do have a very compelling. The September meeting actually spent a lot of time talking about this. So if you could just take us through that quickly.
The visitor center will have an exhibition that we're just formulating all of the points, but we've had descendants. I've met personally and been interviewed with the descendants of the 24th Regiment. The 24th Regiment built and guarded the camp. It was an African-American regiment, and I think many of you know there was conflict with citizens in Houston, and many of them were hanged in punishment for this event. And they were, within the last year, all exonerated as innocent of their crime. So this story will absolutely be told in the interpretive center. That didn't happen in this place of the Memorial Grove, so it's part of the narrative of the entire project that we're going to have in signage. Like, we don't have an artifact of archaeology to tell that story, so it's going to be through the interpretation and signage. We've learned about the 365th, 370th, thank you, and their incredible valor. It was an African-American troop that was trained in segregation, lived in segregation, dined in segregation at Camp Logan, but when they went to France, the French army said, we will take these amazing soldiers, gave them uniforms, and they were invited to fight. I think that regiment was awarded 18 Croix de Guerre for outstanding valor in World War I. And so we want people to come and feel like they've met the soldiers. They've understood the complexity, the difficulty, the segregation, but the actual true stories of the many, many lives that served at Camp Logan.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Thank you for telling the story of the Memorial Groves Project and what it will be Chris Ballard, Thomas Waltz, Emily Manderson, Michael Quino. Thank you all so much. Please, I think I can still stick around for a few minutes if you'd like to talk with them. From all of us, thank you very much.